was a warm summer evening, and Klausner walked quickly through the front gate and around the side of the house, and into the garden at the back. He went on down the garden until he came to a wooden shed, and he unlocked the door, went inside, and closed the door behind him. The interior of the shed was an unpainted room. Against one wall, on the left, there was a long wooden workbench, and on it, among a littering of wares and batteries and small sharp tools, there stood a black box about 3 feet long, the shape of a child's coffin. Klausner moved across the room to the box. The top of the box was open, and he bent down and began to poke and peer inside it among a mass of different colored wares and silver tubes. He picked up a piece of paper that lay beside the box, studied it carefully, put it down, peered inside the box, and started running his fingers along the wares, tugging gently at them to test the connections, glancing back at the paper, then into the box, then at the paper again, checking each ware. He did this for perhaps an hour. Then he put a hand around to the front of the box where there were 3 dials, and he began to twiddle them, watching at the same time the movement of the mechanism inside the box. All the while he kept speaking softly to himself, nodding his head, smiling sometimes, his hands always moving, the fingers moving swiftly, deftly inside the box, his mouth twisting into curious shapes when a thing was delicate or difficult to do, speaking to himself, saying, "Yes, yes, and now this one, yes, yes, but is this right? Is it? Where is my diagram? Ah, yes, of course, yes, yes, that's right, and now, good, good, yes, yes, yes." His concentration was intense. His movements were quick. There was an air of urgency about the way he worked, of breathlessness, of strong, suppressed excitement. Suddenly he heard footsteps on the gravel path outside, and he straightened and turned swiftly as the door opened and a tall man came in. It was Scott. It was only Scott, the doctor. "Well, well, well," the doctor said. "So this is where you hide yourself in the evenings?" "Hullo, Scott," Clonzer said. "I happened to be passing," the doctor told him. "So I dropped in to see how you were. There was no one in the house, so I came on down here. How's that throat of yours been behaving?" "It's all right, it's fine. Now I am here, I might as well have a look at it. Please don't trouble. I'm quite cured. I'm fine." The doctor began to feel the tension in the room. He looked at the black box on the bench. Then he looked at the man. "You have got your hat on," he said. "Oh, have I?" Clonzer reached up, removed the hat, and put it on the bench. The doctor came up closer and bent down to look into the box. "What's this?" he said. "Making a radio?" No, just fooling around." "It's got rather complicated looking innards." "Yes." Clonzer seemed tense and distracted. "What is it?" the doctor asked. "It's rather a frightening looking thing, isn't it?" "It's just an idea." "Yes?" "It has to do with sound, that's all." "Good heavens, man, don't you get enough of that sort of thing all day in your work?" "I like sound." "So it seems." The doctor went to the door, turned, and said, "Well, I won't disturb you. Glad your throat's not worrying you any more." But he kept standing there, looking at the box, intrigued by the remarkable complexity of its inside, curious to know what this strange patient of his was up to. "What's it really for?" he asked. "You have made me." Clownser looked down at the box, then at the doctor, and he reached up and began gently to scratch the lobe of his right ear. There was a pause. The doctor stood by the door, waiting, smiling. "All right, I shall tell you if you are interested." There was another pause, and the doctor could see that Clownser was having trouble about how to begin. He was shifting from one foot to the other, tugging at the lobe of his ear, looking at his feet, and then at last, slowly, he said, "Well, it's like this. It's The theory is very simple, really. The human ear. You know that it can't hear everything. There are sounds that are so low pitched or so high pitched that it can't hear them." "Yes," the doctor said. "Yes." "Well, speaking very roughly, any note so high that it has more than 15,000 vibrations a second, we can't hear it. Dogs have better ears than us. You know how you can buy a whistle whose note is so high pitched that you can't hear it at all. But a dog can hear it." "Yes, I have seen one," the doctor said. "Of course you have. And up the scale, higher than the note of that whistle. There is another note, a vibration if you like, but I prefer to think of it as a note. You can't hear that one either. And above that there is another and another rising right up the scale forever and ever and ever. An endless succession of notes. Only our ears could hear it, so high that it vibrates a million times a second, and another a million times as high as that, and on, higher and higher, as far as numbers go, which is infinity, eternity, beyond the stars." Clownser stood next to the workbench, fluttering his hands, becoming more animated every moment. He was a small, frail man, nervous and twitchy, with always moving hands. His large head inclined toward his left shoulder, as though his neck were not quite strong enough to support it rigidly. His face was smooth and pale, almost white, and the pale grey eyes that blinked and neared from behind a pair of thick, lensed steel spectacles were bewildered, unfocused, remote. He was a frail, nervous, twitchy little man, a moth of a man, dreamy and distracted, suddenly fluttering and animated. And now the doctor, looking at that strange pale face and those pale grey eyes, felt that somehow there was about this little person a quality of distance, of immense, immeasurable distance, as though the mind were far away from where the body was. The doctor waited for him to go on. Clownser sighed and clasped his hands tightly together. "I believe," he said, speaking more slowly now, "that there is a whole world of sound about us all the time that we cannot hear. It is possible that up there in those high pitched, inaudible regions there is a new exciting music being made with subtle harmonies and fierce grinding discords. A music so powerful that it would drive us mad if only our ears were tuned to hear the sound of it. There may be anything, for all we know, there may." "Yes," the doctor said, "but it's not very probable." "Why not? Why not?" Clownser pointed to a fly sitting on a small roll of copper ware on the workbench. "You see that fly? What sort of a noise is that fly making now? None that one can hear. But for all we know, the creature may be whistling like a very mad on a very high note, or barking or croaking or singing a song. It's got a mouth, hasn't it? It's got a throat." The doctor looked at the fly and he smiled. He was still standing by the door with his hand on the door knob. "Well," he said, So you are going to check up on that? Some time ago, Clonzer said, I made a simple instrument that proved to me the existence of many odd, inaudible sounds. Often I have sat and watched the needle of my instrument recording the presence of sound vibrations in the air when I myself could hear nothing. And those are the sounds I want to listen to. I want to know where they came from and who or what is making them. And that machine on the table there, the doctor said, is that going to allow you to hear these noises? It may. Who knows? So far, I have had no luck, but I have made some changes in it, and tonight I am ready for another trial. This machine, he said, touching it with his hands, is designed to pick up sound vibrations that are too high pitched for reception by the human ear and to convert them to a scale of audible tones. I tune it in, almost like a radio. How would you mean? It isn't complicated. Say, I wish to listen to the squeak of a bat. That's a fairly high pitched sound, about 30,000 vibrations a second. The average human ear can't quite hear it. Now, if there were a bat flying around this room and I tuned in to 30,000 on my machine, I would hear the squeaking of that bat very clearly. I would even hear the correct note, F sharp or B flat, or whatever it might be, but merely at a much lower pitch. Don't you understand? The doctor looked at the long black coffin box. And you are going to try it tonight? Yes. Well, I wish you luck. He glanced at his watch. My goodness, he said, I must fly. Goodbye, and thank you for telling me. I must call again sometime and find out what happened. The doctor went out and closed the door.